I think it's fair to say that all bets were right the fuck off when it came to the Phantom Pain, even more than they usually are with Hideo Kojima, aka Hideo Sure I Know What Tone Is, it's the sound made by the little bell that the nice men in white coats say I have to wear, Kojima. Because of course Konami have recently decided they're going to take everything they've built over the years as a game developer, arrange it nicely in front of them, and then pick up a big hammer and smash and smash and smash and smash and smash. Sorry we had to cancel Silent Hills, but we kinda lost our interest in it around the same time we lost our fucking minds! Here, have a pachinko machine instead. We like pachinko machines because it's nice to have something around that has some fucking balls. Also, fuck off, Hideo Kojima, you're too reliably bankable for our liking. We'd much rather stick our feet up our arse and bounce down the stairs making burbling noises with our lips. Brrr. Although Phantom Pain doesn't seem to have gotten the memo because Hideo Kojima's name is all over it to a frankly quite psychotic degree. Christ knows why every individual mission has to have its own credit sequence unless Hideo's worried we've all got short-term memory loss. I know you're the director, Hideo. There's a mentally damaged woman over there with her tits hanging out. Of course it's by you. So I'd normally recap the plot of the Metal Gear Solid series at this point, but sadly I've mislaid my magic hammer with which I would normally beat myself about the head 8 or 9 times before I made the attempt. So let's just say that at the end of Ground Zero's naked big snake boss man, or whatever his name is, got blown apart by the amazing exploding vagina. He wakes up from a coma 9 years later, just as the forces of the evil Cypher track him down and send a man made of fire and a ghost toddler to blow him up. Has the magic hammer turned up yet? I'm starting to think this sounds weird. But he escapes and sets about getting his private army back together while pursuing revenge against the villainous Skullface, who you'll remember is the guy with a skull face. But now he's wearing a Lone Ranger mask too, because he didn't want people thinking the Skullface was his only thing. So Phantom Pain is another addition to the series with Tactical Espionage Operations awkwardly stapled on as the subtitle rather than Tactical Espionage Action, because there's a base management element. How that works is that Big Boss is so legendary that every enemy soldier in the game secretly longs to be his personal beard comber. Not so legendary that any of them will recognize him on sight. I mean, you could be any old stealth operative with an eye patch and beard that look like they came from a child's pirate costume, but if you can overpower them and attach them to a balloon that rockets them into the sky, which incidentally is totally not how the Fulton recovery system works, I think Hideo only got 10 words into the Wikipedia page before he got overexcited, then enemy soldiers will happily join your base crew as soon as they've picked the albatross out of their teeth. I like this mechanic, and not just because it's completely hilarious. When you're mashing genres together like the breast inspector at the Real Doll Factory, then ideally the stealth action titty and the base management titty should feel like they complement each other. And that's what this does. It means that you're motivated to be stealthy and non-lethal not because of any contrived bonus or because you're some kind of weirdo who objects to exterminating human life, but because you need to fill a few more seats on the party bus. When you're giving a guard post a wide berth on your way somewhere and then notice that one of the guards has an A rank in research, which is all that you need to research the special beard gun, and decide that if the prisoner you're supposed to be rescuing has survived this long, then he could probably stand another 10 minutes of brutal beatings, that's when the organic sandbox is being organic. Oh yeah, Metal Gear Solid is a sandbox game now. The series has long aspired towards truly organic gameplay ever since Metal Gear Solid 3 was mostly about exploring a forest biting the heads off frogs, and I think Phantom Pain comes pretty close to finally achieving that goal. Most missions just give you one objective in the middle of enemy territory and the rest is up to you. Scout ahead and carefully worm your way inside, or kick the front door down with your robot legs and judo throw the guard into his birthday cake. But the problem that Metal Gear Solid has always had, besides being written by someone who got all his ideas on authentic dialogue from watching the infomercials that come on in between Steven Seagal films, is that they always give you about 100 million methods of achieving something that isn't actually that complicated. For example, if there is a guard between you and something you want, you can shoot him with one of about 50 squillion guns, you can instruct your dog stroke naked woman stroke helicopter to bite, shoot, carpet bomb the square 50 yards he's standing in respectively, distract him with an inflatable man lovingly crafted by some very creepy person on your R&D team, or toss a single empty magazine to their immediate right, run up behind and instantly knock them out with one hit, then feel unaccountably like you've somehow let everyone down. Of course, one hit isn't doing it justice. There's a slightly arcane process involving either holding the right trigger and releasing it as you push the analog stick, or just hammering on the trigger like it's a misbehaving clitoris. Point is, Metal Gear Solid has never been efficiently designed on any level, and cutting the dialogue down to less than a Wilbur Smith novel's worth was only one thing. Navigating the base management menu is like shoveling your driveway after a devastating gooey blizzard, and I don't see why I have to go through the rigmarole of calling down a chopper, getting on and waiting for it to take off before I'm allowed to select the next mission, or decide how to reupholster the soft furnishings. Do you want to know what the online gameplay is like? So the fuck would I, because until I put the game into offline mode, the loading times were unbearable. And not for loading levels, loading menus for fuck's sake. All I wanted to do was call base mid-mission and tell them to upgrade the beard gun and record Inspector Morse. For each of those I had to wait 30 seconds for the spinny thing to stop going around. Look, I like the core game on principle, but all the in-between flappery just wore me down if I'm honest, and the characters just aren't fun anymore. The 3 leads are all grim growly men growling grimly. I listen to the audio logs and I can barely tell the fuckers apart, and Kojima's trademark incredibly redundant dialogue doesn't help. In other words, As much as it paints a very reductive portrayal of the mentally ill, I feel kinda sorry for Mad Max. It's such good video game adaptation material. Christ knows why it's been fucking around with movies for so long. Movies are all like, oh look, a little film about S&M perverts driving around a desert and blowing each other up. Well, the Academy need look no further for the best dramatic screenplay candidate. Meanwhile, video games are all like, S&M perverts driving around and blowing each other up? Where the fuck do I sign? Along your cock using my saliva instead of ink? Can do. So Mad Max, or as it's called in its native land, Mid-Mix, finally rolls into Video Game Town, disregarding the Mad Max game on the NES, which doesn't count for a whole lot because fucking Wayne's World had a game on the NES, only to find that the industry is way ahead of it and we've already played what might as well have been the Mad Max video game about 17 times already by my count, between Borderlands, Rage, Carmageddon, the entire Fallout franchise, and to a lesser extent Mario Kart. In a post-apocalyptic Australian outback whose population has a slightly bafflingly large percentage of people with American accents, Max Rokotansky is doing what he's always doing at the start of Mad Max stories, that is to say bugger all, drifting about squinting into the middle distance until he falls foul of this week's roaming gang of S&M murderers who will in some way fuck him over so he can mad all over them. Sure enough, one comes along and Max battles them in an overlong intro cinematic with a textbook case of why the fuck didn't they make this a playable prologue before losing his car and his jumper and being left for dead in the desert. Shortly, the other thing that always happens in Mad Max stories happens. He stumbles upon an insane person and teams up with them, although he tries his damnedest not to. Mad Max's personality I would rate a 0.7 on the Kratos scale of anti-hero so riddled with generic anger it works against their own best interests. He's filled with naked indignation whenever a character has the balls to be in his presence without bashing their heads in on the floor amid a stream of progressively slurred apologies. But who cares if the protagonist's personality is more repellent than a cast iron toilet brush as long as he has a relatable goal? Max sets out on an epic quest to... Actually, what the hell are we doing here? Well, we're antagonizing the local warlord, but that's more of a hobby thing. That's what Max does when there's no Games Workshop nearby where he can buy new paints for his Warhammer miniatures. No, that's just in aid of his main, if you'll pardon the pun, driving motivation, which is to make his car really nice. But you can be halfway through the game and driving a spiky death metal monster that fires rockets and plays ice cream van music, and the game just keeps trundling along, shrugging its shoulders as to where the hell it's going. It's a sandbox in almost the most literal sense, in that you explore a whole bunch of sand and do a lot of bare-knuckle boxing. But it's the kind of sandbox where you're getting more of your money's worth in the side activities. If you only follow the critical path, you'll play the story of a man who shows up at friendly camps, promises them the earth, and then fucks off to the next one, like a wasteland Jehovah's Witness. But Mad Max isn't just a sandbox game, it's the sandbox game. That is, the thing that every sandbox game is now. You look for collectible caches of in-game currency, you go to some kind of observation tower thing that reveals all the in-game currency in the near vicinity, you bring down enemy strongholds to reduce threat and acquire more in-game currency, and then you spend it all on upgrades to make it easier to get in-game currency. In this case, it's scrap, which Max can use to upgrade his car and himself, for life is hard in the wasteland, and the only way to learn new fighting techniques is to eat large quantities of jagged rusty metal. It made me think of Shadow of Mordor a little bit, and that in turn made me think, that's right, my brain can think about a whole two things, you jelly, that the sandbox game has now become what the third-person shooter was not too long ago, the default setting that tends to get rolled out for generic action games after the creative team have sat around a blank whiteboard all morning and have started hankering for an early lunch. Not that there's anything wrong with the default game, it's a staple like bread, but without butter and or luncheon meat, bread by itself's fit only for pigeons. Remember Kane and Lynch too? I've been trying not to over the years with the able assistance of Dr. Bleach. Putting aside the horrible camera effects and sweaty old man buttocks, it was shit because the gameplay had nothing besides the default third-person shooting. It was just bread and buttocks. The default game lives and dies on a unique selling point, like Shadow of Mordor's little black book of orcs. So what is Mad Max's USP? Well, there's cars. Cars in a sandbox game? Shut your mouth. That would be like putting Bulgarian women in the Bulgarian women's national handball team. Car combat, I should say. As you drive around, you frequently run into convoys of enemy vehicles on some errand or another that isn't so important they can't take time out to hound you remorselessly to your death, but that was more an annoyance than an impromptu breakout of wacky racist fun times when you're trying to reach the next observation balloon and someone's grill is trying to French kiss your exhaust pipe. I eventually found it much more efficient to get out of my car and stand next to a big wall, then watch the little cogwheels turn in the heads of the enemy drivers until they realise they can't ram me without totaling their vehicle, and now have to get out for some of that now standard punch counter combat that I'm betting the Arkham Asylum people really wish they'd patented. Right, now let's get to that observation balloon so in future I can fast travel past all this bullshit. What was that? Says the game. Please call down a massive dust storm. Well, since you insist. I never figured out what the fuck I was supposed to do in dust storms. If I'm supposed to wait for it to pass, then it takes way too fucking long, because I always gave up and went back to the nearest friendly outpost. I try to use the observation thingy regardless, but for some stupid reason the game doesn't think it's a good idea care to fly hot air balloons in howling gales of jagged metal, so Mad Max is a resounding meh. It's got a perfectly adequate, if occasionally buggy, sandbox setup, but the only USP seems to be the fact that it fucks you about on your way to places, which is precisely the same USP as the Birmingham one-way system. Oh boy, a review not only of a fucking HD remake, but an HD remake of the game that first introduced us to cover-based shooting, with much the same effect as when Kurt Cobain was introduced to the wonderful world of home defense solutions. Better call the aeroplane bathroom maintenance crew, cause some shit's about to start flying. Well, the funny thing is, viewer, that after a lengthy string of indie games, sandboxes, interactive stories, and whatever the fuck that Godzilla thing was, I found myself hankering for a bit of good old-fashioned linear shooty action, even if I would have to spend most of it cuddling a chest-high wall with a suit of armour the size of a boat that I'm not so much wearing as vaguely located inside. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Maybe the distaste I developed for cover-based shooting was rooted more in its overexposure than its inherent god-awfulness. Now that it's the generic sandbox that feels like the overexposed thing, it'd be nice to kill baddies without having to climb to the top of a radio mast first and peep through their changing room windows with high-power binoculars. The other thing is that I'd never gotten around to playing through Gears of War 1. I've only done 2 and 3, and obviously I lost some of the impact of the plot moments in those games since I lacked the necessary background. I tried really hard to remember some of those plot moments. I think there was a bit with a giant worm in Gears of War 2. I do remember a moment in Gears of War 3 where Marcus Phoenix got very cross and yelled at someone. Everything else kind of blurs together into a smelly grey-brown cloud in big stompy boots. What I was really after was some context as to why we hate the Locust, when the only reason given for hating them is that they're ugly, violent, and keep yelling mean things, in which case Marcus Phoenix probably shouldn't be throwing stones. It'd be different if we were on Earth. Fuck the Locust if they were invading Earth. The audience automatically has an investment in defending Earth because all our stuff is there. But we're not on Earth. I think they did say the name of the planet, but then someone said, "Scratch one grub," and my brain died a little bit. A cruel person might say that Gears of War is an odd candidate for HD remakes, as prettying it up is the very definition of a lost cause. Hey, remember all that greyish-brown cluttered garbage? Well, now it glistens a bit as well, like the dog's been licking it. Without a side-by-side comparison, I couldn't tell you if there's been a massive visual improvement, but just in practical terms, I still had the most tremendous difficulty telling the enemy apart from my NPC squad members at first glance, because they tended to die at roughly the same rate, and are all built like the Sugar Puff monster cosplaying as a Doom 3 environment, and there's some really wonky animation whenever a character has to do something more athletic than waddle into a corner. You'll see a dude run up to a chest-high wall, then there'll be a violent flurry of poorly animated limbs, and then they'll be on the other side of the chest-high wall shooting me in the face. I suppose there's only so much one can do to make a Volt animation look natural when the Volter is so loaded down with muscle and armour they probably couldn't walk across a room without their grizzled thighs sanding their own balls off. Don't you just hate when a game has 4 difficulty settings? I'm a devout medium man. Easy just doesn't stimulate, and I lack the time to get really autistically good enough for hard, so when I'm offered medium A and medium B, it immediately sets off a harrowing identity crisis. On this occasion I thought, well, I've played enough shooters in my time, and I did remember to put on my big boy trousers this morning. Let's lean towards the hard end of medium. That, in retrospect, was a mistake. I should have remembered that Gears of War was the introduction of cover-based shooting, and when you're introducing a mechanic, you have to make it really important so that players can fully appreciate the brickwork rubbing companionably against their cheek. To that end, if you stand up for more than 1 second, the immediate area gets filled with so many bullets that I don't know if I died from blood loss or suffocation. What the burbling cock dribble are we even wearing this bulky suit of armour with the practicality of a wheelie bin with arm and leg holes cut out for, if it can take fewer hits than an asthmatic bong user? The Locust can take it, mind, because this is the bone-idlest approach to higher difficulty settings in action. They just crank up the enemy health or crank down the player's damage output. Either way, the end result is you keep firing and they keep defiantly titty-shaking until they get bored, jump over your cover and shotgun your top half off your bottom half as you try to wrench yourself away from your amorous chest-high wall, and it feels like the chainsaw bayonet thing only works when the butterfly of chaos theory isn't flapping its wings. I suppose the point of this whole exercise was to see how Gears of War holds up 9 years on, and incidentally, most classy people would have held out for the 10-year anniversary, Microsoft. I guess you didn't want to bank on getting through another year without every single X-bone imploding from sheer force of suck. And I suppose I have my answer, because I went into this thinking, boy, I could just do with some nice straightforward cover-based shooting for once, and came out of it thinking, boy, I could just do with a mule kick to the gonads. If only the games industry had had that epiphany so quickly the first time around. Cover-based shooting is lame, and like all lame things, it needs a crutch. Uncharted had adventure set pieces, Kane and Lynch 2 had sweaty buttocks. Gears of War was certainly part of our education in that area, but re-releasing it feels like re-releasing The Loom. You know what I think we did learn over the last not quite a decade? Cover-based gameplay is better suited to stealth than to shooting. Using it to creep up on someone as you think, little does he know, I'm about to slash his ankles up until his Achilles tendons flap about like drawstrings on a hoodie. That's dynamic and proactive and various other words middle managers like. Cover-based shooting, meanwhile, is fairly static and reactive. Little does he know, I'm about to pop up and shoot back in a minute, just like I've done 17 times already, but this time it'll be 1 meter further to the right. And another thing we learned since 2006 is that it helps if your human characters are the slightest bit relatable, or indeed human, rather than 20 litres of chunky beef stew poured into a onesie and taught how to swear. I have a soft spot for the slasher movie. Not that they're ever anything above god-awful. I mean, calling Friday the 13th art is like calling a face full of crusted shit cosmetic surgery. But I like them because there's something very essentially cathartic about watching a bunch of complete twats get completely twatted. When the parade of out-of-work actors in their mid to late 20s pretending to be carefree teenagers with unfeasibly easy access to expensive holiday real estate seem to find no end of amusement in jumping out at each other 10 million times across the first hour as the soundtrack shrieks like Sharon Stone just to recross her legs in front of the violinists, Jason Voorhees is acting out the growing desires of the audience as he starts slitting them up like Christmas presents with good dentistry. Until Dawn is an interactive story of the David Cage school pushed through the filter of slasher movie, with the promise being that if we make all the right decisions, perhaps we could keep all the out-of-work 20-something actors alive. I don't think you were paying attention, Until Dawn. I will have made the right decisions if every single one of these gurgle Burks ends up upholstering the soft furnishings in Leatherface's man cave. It's funny how developers of this sort of thing always act like no one's ever thought of it before. You start Until Dawn and it's so fucking excited with itself you have to watch a little video going, "Decisions have consequences. Is your mind blown?" Let's hope so, because then you won't notice our complete lack of creativity. Because the main cast are straight from the teen slasher default creation wizard. Every single one of them could have their personalities fully summarized with one 5-letter word. Brave, hunky, bitch, funny, timid, weird, whore, and let's not forget black. While partying in Weird's holiday home, these carefree out-of-work actors accidentally act 2 of their friends to death, but all of them get back together the following year in the same house and don't feel in the least bit weird about it. I guess the party must have been fucking legendary before the buzz got killed by the whole manslaughter thing. So from that point the game does the David Cage thing. That is, you steer a character who controls like they're standing on a Roomba with low batteries around some rooms looking for things to pick up and stare at like a monkey finding a purple banana, and then switch to scripted QuickTime event chase sequences like you're playing Gone Home on one monitor and Guitar Hero on the other. It also owes something to Silent Hill's Shattered Memories in that it tries to psychologically evaluate you to an extent, albeit with considerably less subtlety. At one point a character brazenly asks, "Say, which 3 of these things do you find scariest?" And lo and behold, the 3 you pick will show up later. That seems like an easy system to game. No, really, I'm terrified of Magnus cider, Jaffa cakes and hand jobs. Now, obviously every single one of David Cage's games have been one long exercise in sitting on a toilet looking sad, and QuickTime events are to gameplay what a creepy moustache is to a primary school teacher. So I was expecting to be down on Until Dawn, till I noticed I'd been playing for 6 hours straight and the edge of my seat had carved a furrow across my buttocks. Yes, Until Dawn is doing something right. I think the teen slasher may well be the genre that can make the branching story thing actually work. They're usually isolated with a lot of location revisiting, so the massive axe we saw in Act 1 can be splitting some nadgers in twain in Act 3. What's more, it's the genre in which the cast list effectively doubles as a scoreboard, and you can let any of them get arbitrarily murdered without sacrificing their role in the story, because getting arbitrarily murdered largely is their role in the story. Even the QuickTime event sequences didn't irk as much as usual, just because characters will be really no-crossed finger backsies dead for the whole rest of the plot if you miss certain ones, which aside from being the definition of win-win, actually adds some real weight to proceedings. Mind you, it means later scenes have to proceed on the basis that certain characters could be alive or dead, and because of that, surviving characters seem to get over deaths really weirdly fast. Sorry about your boyfriend, lady. No worries, I'll just bring myself off on his next stump. There's a focus on characters and their interactions. The game keeps track of their personalities in the form of individual stats. Why, I don't know, because their actions are always decided by you. Oh look, this character's got maximum bravery. Well, I've decided he's going to do something cowardly now, and you can just eat shit from the jar with a great big dessert spoon. Stats. Overall, though, I had a good feeling. I mean, the plot's all over the place. First there's supernatural elements, then there isn't, then there is again. It's like it brought together the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, The Descent, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and rather ill-advisedly tried to get a DVDA going. And I hate how these sorts of games always make you jump through hoops for the most basic interactions out of some cockeyed idea that it enhances immersion. It's not enough to press X to pick something up, we've also got to stand there with one hand groping an invisible titty until we also hold down the reach out button and steer it about with the analog stick like our father was a skill tester machine. So there's that, but the game still exceeded expectations, until I started the second playthrough, and my goodwill started drying up faster than the tears at Rupert Murdoch's funeral. Narrative-driven games seem to have really fallen out with run buttons lately. Maybe run buttons said something bitchy about narrative's new girlfriend, but it would have been nice to have something faster than a brisk walk, especially when someone is screaming horribly in the next room and all we can do is amble over like they're merely asking for help programming the VCR. The skip cutscene button must also have been spreading those girlfriend rumours, because one of those would also have been nice, especially after I discovered just how much the game was bullshitting about the branching path thing for most of the story. Look, I'm fine with not every choice splitting the universe. I don't expect picking the fun-sized Twix over the Snickers having a devastating snowball effect, but there's a bit where 2 characters are in a trap and you have to pick which one dies. Fairly pivotal choice, you'd think, but after restarting the chapter like 4 times, I learned to my annoyance that the game always kills the same one, regardless of your pick. Probably because a later mandatory plot twist hinges on it, but it's not what I'd call branching story. It's more like a log. So here, presumably, is how the conversation went down. Hi, kids! Hi, Uncle who works at Nintendo. Do you like Mario? Sure do. Have you ever wanted to make your own Mario levels and play a theoretically infinite number of community-created ones? More than wanted to, Uncle Nintendo. Fan-created ROM hacks and tribute games have existed almost as long as the games themselves. We know. And now you can take them all away and smash them to pieces with a cease and desist letter on the end of a 2x4. Because now you can do pretty much the same thing with Super Mario Maker. It's considerably less versatile and creatively fulfilling, but here's the good part. It makes us a hell of a lot more money. Say thank you. Thank you, Uncle Nintendo. Now I think we both know you have better ways of showing gratitude than that, kids. But then this is Nintendo's pattern, isn't it? They did the same thing with Let's Play videos. You know that thing the fans do out of love for our product? That's ours now, and we're going to turn the screws until all that love turns into money, because goodwill is nice and all, but it's not going to wax the Lamborghini. Still, they're not running a fucking charity, guys. Someone has to pay for all those unsold Luigi amiibos, but I still find it alarming how quickly the Mario franchise has devolved ever since it peaked with Mario Galaxy. It ran back to 2D with the increasingly ironically named New Super Mario Bros. Series, and despite a brief attempt to patch up the thing they had with 3D gameplay in the make-or-break second honeymoon that was Super Mario 3D World, the divorce has been finalized, and Mario has now devolved to the point that they can't even be asked to design levels for it anymore. And whatever Super Mario Maker's individual merits, you can't deny that this is something you only do when there's bugger all left that can be done with the franchise. Very rarely is the Colour-It-Yourself Jurassic World activity book considered as big a release as the original film. And that's what Super Mario Maker is. It's a great big brightly coloured smile through clenched teeth and a cheerful cry of, well, if you're so clever, you fucking do it. If Nintendo's scheme was to make us appreciate the stranglehold they have on their intellectual property by showing us the landslide of soiled nappies that results when they loosen their grip for a second, then it almost worked. But the level editor they provided isn't that flexible, so it's more like an asshole dad batting his 9-year-old's pitch into next door's garden and very slowly going for the home run. Oh, couldn't you make a level as good as us with precisely the same parameters we had about 20 years ago? Better leave it to the grown-ups then. Perhaps I could make something more impressive if the building mode started with more assets unlocked than 2 kinds of stickle bricks and a baby harp seal. I know when you're selling a creativity tool to a general audience that could get distracted by an ant spunking into a tin bath on the other side of the house, you don't want to throw shit like pathfinding AI at them in Lesson 1. But if you trust us with a Goomba, one might assume we could muddle our way through Jumpy Fish as well. This isn't about player training though, is it? Only through time and repeated sessions does more stuff unlock, not unlike with Splatoon 2 levels at a time thing. I guess paying money isn't enough of a pledge of loyalty for Nintendo anymore, and the technology doesn't yet support ritualistic fingertip removal. I do wish we could have been permitted a bit more creativity with the cosmetics. Maybe I want to do a fiery lava level with a sunny green meadow in the background, as some kind of David Lynch-style visual metaphor for the rot behind society's innocent facade. Furthermore, cosmetic trees and rocks and shit seem to get added randomly without our input, and it would have been nice to be able to consciously put down a weeping willow to represent the jet of spunk coming out of the big willy I made out of bouncy music note blocks. But I suppose if it's creative fulfillment you're after, you'd just make your own game from scratch, or write a book, or bite the tip of your finger open and scrawl patterns all over the walls of your cell in your own blood. Look at me, everyone! It took me 4 paragraphs to draw the conclusion that Super Mario Maker is just for making Mario levels. You can make them based on Super Mario Bros. 1 and 3 on the NES, Super Mario World on the SNES, or New Super Mario Bros. Of no fixed abode. Here's a brief summary of the crucial differences between those 4 seminal titles. That was it. It's just cosmetic, really, and that makes me come overall introspective. Mario went to a land, a world, a galaxy. He's golfed, karted, partied, and, sharted. We even had him teach you typing once, because when you hear his faintly racist Italian gibberish, you quite naturally think that here's a guy that needs to share the secret of his communication skills. And now you can see how far his journey took him, to exactly the same fucking place he started, just with volumetric lighting and more than one background colour. But enough philosophy, let's get back to drawing cocks with blocks. Fun though it is to force an entire legion of Koopa Troopers to march in the form of the word minge, the creativity toy is a two-way street, a double penetration if you will, and without players it's just minge marching into the void. But playing Super Mario Maker is not what I'd call fulfilling. Obviously I immediately looked at the highest rated user levels of all time, because Yahtzee fucking Croshaw won't be fobbed off with any old tat, but most of the top 5 were novelty levels where you don't move and just get shunted to the exit through an elaborate Heath Robinson machine, like a turd in the Birmingham Canal system. You see, relying on the public for game-selling content is always inevitably like relying on a super soaker full of raw sewage to paint your living room, and the general audience likes novelty more than they like their ability to fucking breathe in and out. A novelty level may distract if viewed as a 5-minute YouTube video on the day that all other forms of entertainment inexplicably caught fire, but it's not what I disinfected the largely unused Wii U controller for, so I turned to random levels, most of which fall into one of 3 categories: a level with 10 million of something, the kind of obnoxious difficulty a Roald Dahl villain would come up with, or 10 million of something being obnoxiously difficult. Maybe you could stick to entering level codes from your mates, an experience reminiscent of all that Wii friend code bullshit, in that it brings to gaming all the rip-snorting fun of ordering plane tickets online. Perhaps we just stick to novelty levels after all, since that's what Super Mario Maker is, a novelty. Hope you liked 2D Mario platformers while they lasted, because now we've stripped them down to their guts and thrown all the bits out to the crowd. Maybe you can extract one more fleeting laugh from them by sticking them out through your trouser zippers and yelling, "Look everyone, I've caught gonorrhea." You can learn a lot about a person by taking them to a self-service buffet. Some people want to try a bit of everything, pineapple and rocket and crusty rolls stacked shoulder to shoulder. They're like Double Fine, always wanting to explore new ideas. Other kinds of people just get a big pile of the same ravioli they had last time. They're like your Ubisoft. They found one thing they like and they're going to stick to it for as long as they can, probably making a little radio tower out of breadsticks. Then there are the people who immediately grab the entire bucket of chicken wings and then sell them back to the other customers for 99 cents each, and that's why you don't invite EA to the buffet. But I digress. Frictional Games, the Penumbra and Amnesia Dark Descent lads, is in the Ravioli Club. So if you were to say, Yahtzee, here's a new first-person survival horror adventure game where you can't fight and spend half your time crouched in shadows avoiding looking at monsters and the other half clumsily flinging physics objects off shelves looking for documents and puzzle solutions, also it's by Frictional Games, I would reply, why did you just say precisely the same sentence twice? Soma, besides being the thing you say to open a conversation with your mother, is a game about an everyday schlub protagonist named Simon Jarrett, who wakes up in his everyday schlub apartment and goes to a laboratory to undergo an experimental brain scan as treatment for his everyday schlub terminal head injury. As the scan goes off, he is mysteriously transported to a spooky undersea complex 100 years in the future that I guess caught everything's gone to shit disease from hanging out with Rapture too much. And I immediately did my little pouty face and said, if this turns out we're dreaming and that this messed up undersea complex is representative of our dying brain, then I'm going to everyday schlub your kneecaps off, Frictional Games. I don't want to spoil anything beyond this, so I won't say if I was right, but I will say that I wasn't giving the game enough credit. Soma is a rather effective and well-told chunk of good old-fashioned hard sci-fi dealing with philosophical questions of identity and consciousness, and that's a hard sentiment to make funny, so I just arranged the words into the shape of a big willy for you. You'll note that one word conspicuous by its absence from this big willy is horror, and we'll come back to that. The story has that trademark Frictional Games denseness to it, but it works because we see it through the eyes of Schlubman Jarrett, who doesn't know any more than we do. He learns as we learn and pontificates aloud about the twists, and at times you really feel for the guy, especially when... this is going to be really hard to do without spoilers, isn't it? Especially when certain things happen, and he learns things about the thing from before. However, he did lose me a little bit at the end when he got really surprised and angry because a thing happened despite the exact same thing having happened about an hour previously, and he had an identical reaction to the thing you'd think he would have remembered. But all those things aside, I came away from the game quite satisfied with how the story turned out. I can confidently state that that aspect of the game works well. Whoops, better call the hotel porter, we've got a loaded sentence needs unpacking. You see, despite being ravioli fiends, you can tell Frictional want to at least poke their heads out of their comfort zone to see if they can maybe find a bit of parmesan. For one thing, it's sci-fi rather than some old-timey Lovecraft-style environment from before they invented colours other than brown, plus the main character doesn't have a posh British accent. But then someone said, are you going to do something new with the gameplay then? And like a small child in a school play who wasn't quite ready for an audience, Frictional Games burst into tears and had to be hustled back to their comfort zone by Mrs. Henderson. So of course there's monsters, and occasionally the exploring and puzzle solving is broken up by having to sneak around one of their patrols trying to figure out if the weird squelchy noise they just made means that they spotted you, heard a sound that you made, or had too many kippers for breakfast. And as with Frictional's previous games, you're discouraged from looking at certain monsters, which worked perfectly well in the panicky dungeons of the Dark Descent, but in this game just made me ruminate on how unreasonable it is to ask that the player simultaneously avoid going near to monsters and avoid trying to determine where the fuck they are. The problem is that the monster stuff just doesn't gel with Simon's story very well. It feels like they came up with a really contrived reason for there to be monsters and then had to come up with another contrived reason for why they're trying to kill you. Contrivance upon contrivance for no better reason than to have the hunty gameplay again. It's like watching weird porn. I can just about accept that every random woman we run into immediately wants to fuck in a pond. I just find it hard to believe that they'd all coincidentally have penises instead of nipples. The thing is, Simon's story just doesn't have a horror feel to it. I never get the all-important sense of being alone, partly because Simon had a tag-along sidekick to talk to, but even besides that, Simon feels more like a companion to rather than an extension of the player, because he'll be carrying on a philosophical debate about the nature of being, while I'm using his hands to see how many loose physics objects I can balance on a dead scientist's buttocks. And in between the Monster Heidi sections, he always talks about the ordeals with the same tone of voice one would use to describe the time you had getting through Bay Area traffic at 4 in the afternoon. Soma feels like a decent melancholy sci-fi mystery story living next door to a sci-fi horror B-movie whose dog keeps escaping and jumping in our swimming pool. What a little bastard. And you can really feel the game struggling to mesh the two right up until the end when it blows a little raspberry and gives up trying. On the way to the final area to conclude the Simon story, a new character literally appears from nowhere. It pops his head around the door and says, "Sorry to interrupt, player, but before you tie up the main plot, could we borrow you for 5 minutes to tie up the shitty monster plot as well?" So you follow him into a little room, press one button labelled Resolve Shitty Monster Plot, and then get on with what you were doing. I'm only slightly exaggerating. So I suppose if Antoine de Saint-Exupéry were here, he'd ask, would Soma be improved if they took out the monster stealthing altogether and got by with exploration, puzzles and environmental hazards? Also, didn't I die in 1944? Well, I'd say so, Antoine, but if they took out the scary monsters, what else are the streamers and Let's Players supposed to obnoxiously overreact to? Ah, it's so existential! Yeah, Rock Band, remember that? It was that thing where you pretend to play pretend instruments to an audience with such ridiculously eclectic taste that you can put Avenged Sevenfold and 3 Non-Blondes on the same setlist, and they'll go equally berserk for both. Rhythm games, it seems, are attempting a comeback after the last generation when it suffered a more painful, drawn-out end than the average Metallica song. What fucked it up, I wonder? Maybe the fantasy was broken for players when they finally realised that a real rock band roams about the stage looking cool, kicking wannabe stage divers in the bollocks. They don't stand fixedly in place staring at a monitor, unless Keith Richards has flatlined again. Personally, I think they fucked it up when they added downloadable songs. Any passing chimp could have told the rhythm game producers that they were selling song lists first, and new visuals and gameplay mechanics so distant a second, their light takes 11 minutes to reach the earth. When me and the Rowdy Boys were trying to decide which of the 12 Rock Band and Guitar Hero discs to put in, it was the promise of Freebird or Ozzy Osbourne that drove the argument, not which ones had nicer hats. So the moment you could download whatever songs you wanted, all future installments became redundant. But now a new car battery has been attached to the jump leads because someone in the canteen at Console Towers said, "Hey, I've just noticed the new console generation doesn't have guitar games yet. Surely our hideous, bloody-minded aversion to backwards compatibility could yield more than a few pennies in that area." And then Rock Band and Guitar Hero locked eyes for a moment before simultaneously bolting for the door. Not that I want to be churlish about it. I mean, I wasn't happy when guitar games died because it meant I had to reduce my list of things I'm good at back down to 2. And happily, after picking up Rock Band 4, I can state that the muscle memories lost none of the old magic after I made my fingertips number than an altar boy's ring piece the morning after the scandal finally died down. For the record, I went with the PS4 version on the assumption that it wouldn't make too much of a difference, little realising they'd placed the fucking share button right under the fret bar, so I accidentally quintupled the number of times I've ever pressed that fucking thing. I wouldn't want to press the share button if I were imprisoned in an oubliette and the little clicking sound it made was my only source of entertainment, least of all when I'm in the middle of a fancy solo. It's like abruptly pausing Stairway to Heaven for 5 seconds because Robert Plant wants to take a selfie. So let's talk song list, since we've established they're the lifeblood of this concept. As is invariably always the case, it's about 10% firm meaty songs we like and 90% filler. If it were a pork pie, you could make about 12 of them from a single trotter. But you could always populate the list with your favourite downloadable songs. The gameplay model has come a long way since Guitar Hero's unlocking 5 specific songs at a time. Now for the campaign mode, the game somewhat procedurally generates set lists from all the available songs. Fair enough, but if you haven't downloaded any additional songs because you're old-fashioned and think that just because you paid $250 for the game in a shop means you've finished paying for the fucking thing, then you're going to find yourself repeating the same songs a fuck of a lot. It's like putting together a greatest hits showcase for Dexy's Midnight Runners. But simply being the same Rock Band again but on the new console generation the world eventually got tricked into blithely accepting like a victim of domestic abuse would never be enough in this novelty-obsessed world. So let's devote close attention to Rock Band 4's unique selling point, the freestyle solos, aka pow diddle whiddle 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 bee. How they work is that when a guitar solo inevitably comes up in a song, you're invited to make up your own within certain guidelines. Press the fret buttons however you like, but if there's a big solid bar, you play one sustained note. If it's a wide pattern of lines, you strum 2 to the beat. If there are narrow lines, you strum 4 to the beat. If it turns orange, switch to the other fret buttons. If it all goes wobbly, lift up the neck. If you see a little picture of a horse, stick the neck up your ass and fart on the whammy bar. Rock Band is supposed to be played socially with a total of about 27 units of alcohol distributed among the participants. This seems like a lot of rules to throw at anyone under those circumstances. Ain't no one got time to wait for the guitarist to go through the training manual for a light aircraft. Oh, I know full well that you don't have to follow the directions and can just spend the whole freestyle solo rubbing the button end of the controller against a cat's ass. But forgive me for taking a bit of a condescending tone now as I explain to Harmonix what a video game is. We're here because we want to get a sense of achievement from overcoming a challenge, not to get congratulated for fannying about for 3 minutes. So of course I tried for the highest score, because otherwise what's the point? And found the solo system to be really temperamental. Whether or not you get to keep your points multiplier as you switch from different flavours of button mashing seems to depend entirely on the game's bipolar whims. And trying to get back on the notes after the solo ends was always a fucking car crash, because my fingers were all displaced, and I couldn't take a moment to look at where to put them, because you have to stare fixedly at the incoming notes like you're watching a David Cameron speech and are trying to spot a single sign of human emotion. But the concept of freestyle solos is flawed on the fundamental level, because as I said earlier, these games are about the songs. We want to indulge the pathetic white boy air guitar fantasy of playing along to songs that we like, not to most of a song that we like, plus 1 minute of random caterwauling loosely connected to the finger movements of the confused drunk on lead lump of plastic. The original song's solo carries the band's unique sound and personality. The freestyle solo doesn't sound remotely like it's being played on the same instruments, or even in the same room. It's like you're trying to listen to the radio, but your guitarist roommate keeps having seizures and falling down the stairs. Still, the basic song list isn't exactly a plethora of air guitar classics, is it? And at least a freestyle solo might break up the monotony when you're doing a 2000s indie rock song and have been up and downing the same chord for 30 seconds, like a burn victim trying to wank some sensation back into his cock. But I feel that Rock Band might have bought into its own bullshit that the plastic guitar in any way resembles an actual musical instrument with which one can express oneself creatively. If I wanted you to help me express creativity, Rock Band, I'd urinate my name onto your tits. Well, here we are again. That might as well have been the subtitle, actually. Assassin's Creed, well, here we are again. I'm not sure I can pinpoint the moment that my feelings towards Assassin's Creed crossed over from cautious enthusiasm to a resigned sense of Monday morning dread, because if you told me before, say, Assassin's Creed 3 that they would do Victorian London, I'd have said, all the fucks, yes! I'm gonna rub my face all over Queen Victoria's bustle. Nyum nyum nyum, God bless you, ma'am. Not that 3 was necessarily the shark upsurge moment, because I think we're all in agreement that 4 was good, at least as long as I wave this broken bottle around, but then again, we only liked 4 when it was being Steady Eddie's Pirate Adventure Fun Times, and we didn't like it so much when it was being Assassin's Creed. And obviously Syndicate doesn't have room for a pirate ship, what with all the space taken up by the absurdly large sideburns. I once described the Assassin's Creed series as a line graph, and here's how it continues. From the point that Unity was at, draw a perfectly horizontal line. We've jumped 60 years and about 250 miles, but we haven't budged a fucking inch. I wouldn't say Syndicate is the worst Sassy Credo, but it might well be the laziest. Lazily written, certainly. We play as twins, Jacob and Evie Fry. One of them is brash and reckless and direct combat oriented. The other is smart and measured and more suited to stealth. I'll leave you to guess which one's the boy and which one's the girl, but here's a hint. Try to think like the laziest writer in the fucking universe. And the sideburns were taking up even more space than I first thought, it seems, because there also wasn't room for much in the way of plot or motivation. The game literally starts with the protagonists going, I'm bored, let's go to London and liberate it from the Templars. Ooh, yes, that sounds like a smashing time. And you know what? I've always wanted to start a street gang and call it the Rooks. The way it's presented, it's like one of those terrible wink to audience moments from bad historical films. What did he say his name was? Da Vinci? Well, he won't amount to anything, and may the atomic bomb fall on the Japanese if I'm wrong. Speaking of, remember how Leonardo was a major character in Scredo 2 and the friendship between him and Ezio was actually firmly established? Well, the sideburns muscled that out too, because every meeting with a historical figure in Syndicate plays like something from a fucking kids' TV series. Hello, I'm the famous Charles Dickens. Hello, the famous Charles Dickens. We're stand-ins for the audience. Hello, stand-ins. I guess that means I can inexplicably enlist you to solve my problems. What problems, the famous Charles Dickens? It's all these random thugs stopping me from finishing the famous books I write. If only there was someone around here who could brutally stab them all to death for me. The bridging future plot is the same as it always is as well. We're looking for a new piece of Eden. An assassin in the past found it once, so you have to go into their memories and see how they did it, because we can't be asked to lift a finger and put the same effort in like the entitled fucking millennials we are. Mind you, I said we haven't moved anywhere since Unity, but at least Unity tried to play a bit with the idea of assassins and Templars not being a totally uncomplicated good versus evil situation, whereas in Syndicate, the best and only argument for opposing the main villain is, fucking look at the guy. He's like someone drew a snidely whiplash moustache onto a picture of Joseph Goebbels. So you know what the gameplay of Scredo is by now. It's like being a vigilante rent boy. You jump around the rooftops pacifying districts by strategically inserting things into people. Let's focus on the new mechanics, or rather gimmicks. A gimmick is a new mechanic that lets us achieve something we could already do with the established mechanics, but easier, or harder, in the latter case rendering itself as vestigial as an armless chimpanzee's bell end. Syndicate has examples of both. The new hookshot merely replaces all the traditional climbing gameplay with one button press, and when things go corset up, you can instantly escape pursuers with a smoke bomb and hookshot out, aka the Batman bye-bye. And while it was occasionally annoying to watch Ezio or Altair bounce his little tushy up and down internally debating whether a 2mm crack constitutes a handhold, this is taking out gameplay and not replacing it with anything, unless you count trying to figure out which square foot of rooftop you need to stand in to make the game register the opposite building as hookshotable. Now there's an adjective that deserves to enter common parlance. Hello Patricia, you're looking jolly hookshotable this evening. Meanwhile, there's the street gang stuff, whose main benefit seems to be that if you run into a hairy fight, you can lure your enemies down the stairs, out their stronghold and through the streets until you can find some friendly NPCs to tag in, or alternatively just stab them yourself, you big wet Nelly. Also, there's drivable carriages in the sandbox, which are the centerpiece of the odd chase mission, in which you run enemies off the road with side swipes, which would only be physically possible if your horse were capable of spontaneously teleporting 6 feet to the side. But it's slightly faster than parkour and slightly slower than hookshotting, making it a gimmick introduced and made obsolete within the same sodding game. There are more fiddly little differences I could bring up, but my main point is that broadly speaking, it's just Assassin's Creed another one. More by the numbers find and replace shit. Same ending as usual too. Fight over the piece of Eden with the big villain in the assassin vault, because despite thousands of years of practice, the assassins have yet to develop a secret vault that their own people can't get into before the Templars do. Hey, ancient assassins, you ever heard of safety deposit boxes? You know that opening screen that used to say, this game was developed by a multicultural team of various faiths, etc.? Well, now it says, various beliefs, sexual preferences, and gender identities. Now, in Scredo 1, I assume this was about preemptively dodging racism accusations before they let you slit up all the Muslims, so I wasn't sure what this new one was about until I discovered that roughly half the standard enemies seem to be women now. Go equal rights, but I wonder if this was the equality they had in mind, as I headbutt them and stab them in the tits. Slightly historically iffy, of course, but let's not talk about this like it's an artistic choice. This is because of that bullshit with Unity not having a female player character that the internet randomly drew as the thing they were going to be arbitrarily cross about that week. And this is exactly the kind of bland corporate response one should expect from what Ubisoft is now. There's got to be some remnant of the human being who gave us Prince of Persia Sands of Time and sought actual creative fulfillment in there somewhere. Is he not sick of this bullshit yet?
I'm afraid it's too late for me,
intones Ubisoft as it solemnly begins to remove its helmet, and horror grips my heart as the sideburns begin to emerge. Is it me, or is the current slew of new installments to ongoing franchises even more of a flatline than usual? It feels like for years consoles were slapping the same wet laundry against the same rock rocks over and over again, but then adventure called and they journey through a harrowing odyssey of motion controls and 3D and the faint obligation to innovate that comes with a new console generation. But now things seem to have settled down and they've returned to the Shire to resume slapping the wet laundry against the rocks, blissfully unaware of the VR monster that's about to leap up from the riverbed and make them all puke themselves to death. But while we're waiting for that, let's take a look at Halo 5, the fifth installment of what was the original progenitor of the open quotes next-gen shooter, i.e. nice skybox shame about the game, or rather the second installment of the new trilogy developed by 343 Industries after original creators Bungie decided, hey, this incredibly repetitive sci-fi shooter garbage with pseudo-mythical pretensions, with the emphasis on pretensions, got old pretty fast. Let's move on to Destiny and see if we can beat our previous speed record. And rest assured this is going to be another trilogy, because without wishing to spoil, a sentence fast becoming my own personal I'm not racist, but Halo 5 ends in a cliffhangery Empire Strikes Back kind of way. Oh yes, Microsoft team, no reason to hop off this gravy train as long as it's still moving, even if it's at a fucking crawl across perfectly flat terrain lest its contents slop out and baste nearby cattle. Although there is a little blip on the plot's hard monitor in that Cortana is sort of turning into the big villain now. Oh yeah, spoiler alert. Turns out Cortana's big dramatic death scene in the last game wasn't for realsies, but one could kind of predict that from the mere fact that there is a Halo 5 at all. It doesn't take a giant space protractor to calculate that Master Chief and Cortana are the only marketable faces of the franchise. Which is not even because they're good or interesting characters, it's only because Mr. Chuffy is the protagonist and Cortana flaps her big blue knockers about like a gelatin dessert on a merry-go-round. The funny thing is, even in universe, everyone seems to realise that Mr. Chuffy and his little blue titty monster are the only characters of any importance. So when Mr. Chuffy reports having a weird dream about Cortana being alive and calling him to a distant planet, not a single person so much as hazards the possibility that it was just a dream, and maybe he'll forget all about it if they buy him a new wank doll for Christmas. No, they're all like, ooh, this is serious, we'd better go to that planet then. But despite Mr. Chuffy knowing Cortana best and his grief affecting his work because they had to install little windscreen wipers to get all the tears off his faceplate, he is inexplicably disinvited from the mission. I guess his superiors thought they were playing XCOM and wanted to level up some of their rookies, and so Mr. Chuffy is given an excuse to go rogue. The action is split between the 4 Spartans trying to hunt down Mr. Chuffy and Mr. Chuffy himself, who also has 3 finger puppets with him for no better reason than because his bits need to be 4-player co-op as well. Any potential there might have been here for some kind of tense or dramatic character interplay is lost by the fact that Halo continues to seem like it was written by a castrated slug. The crime for which Mr. Chuffy is being hunted is so completely fucking weak that the two parties can barely summon the effort to be cross at each other when they do meet. 2 of them have a token punch-up about midway through that has more the air of 2 blind people trying to politely get past each other in a crowded restaurant. It might have helped if it had been playable, but Halo 5's attitude seems to be that nothing ruins an action sequence faster than players. The game opens with the 4 members of the B team having a huge spectacular punch-up in a war zone, at which point I went, holy wow, look at that. The stain on the wall behind my TV is exactly the same shape as New Caledonia. If only this overblown footage of people I don't know fighting other people I don't know for reasons unexplained could be as interesting. After all, I know the backstory for that stain. It was left by an errant jet of spunk after I watched Free Willy for the first time. And after this brief sequence of pointless spectacle, almost all the storytelling is done with 2-sentence dialogue exchanges barked out in between samey combat arenas. Hey, third finger puppet, here's a quiet moment. You may now flesh out your backstory in a maximum of 10 words. I worked for 6 months as a seal clubber. And then I'm all like, what? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Post-action sequence probably isn't the best time to have important exposition, because my mind's in recovery mode and I'm trying to chug this Gatorade. I don't want no one trying to tell me the story doesn't matter if the gameplay's fine, because frankly the story is all that Halo 5 could possibly sell itself on. It's the same shooting as always, no new weapons or vehicles, and incidentally Halo games could save me some time and throw my starting rifle and pistol in the bin as the level starts, and give me something I could actually find some fucking ammo for. No new enemies either. There's a boss character in that he's functionally identical to certain standard enemies, but twice the size, and can't shut his fucking face for 5 seconds, and you fight him like 20 times. The plot reason is that it's one guy with like 1,000,000 bodies, and I thought, okay, that's actually quite threatening as villains go, since blowing him up over and over again isn't going to help, and that's pretty much the only string to my bow, until what might as well be the final boss is just 10 more of the guy. Psych! Turns out blowing him up over and over again is going to help. Halo is the premature ejaculation of video games, and I'm not just saying that because Halo 5 feels shorter than Cortana's laundry list. It took till Super Mario Galaxy for Mario to spooge his last, and that was Halo's fucking starting point. Kick off with huge galaxy-spanning threats and giant fat-ass space prostitutes with fanny cankers the size of small moons, and where the fuck are you supposed to go from there? Maybe you could breathe some life in by switching to a more focused character narrative, but the prerequisite for that is actually having characters, beyond titty holograms and giant dustbins on legs. The attitude of Halo 5 seems to be that if you keep chewing the bubble gum, maybe the flavour will eventually somehow come back. It's just more meat for the grinder, more grist to the mill, more innocence lost to the 70s children's TV presenter, but at worst it's merely bland, unless you plan to get into the multiplayer, at which point the threat level elevates to court-martial offence. If paying for the game and the subscription fee weren't quite enough fun for you, the fun need never stop in the micropayment shop, as you struggle to compete with fat 13-year-old tit fiddlers with mum's credit card and poor supervision, and $3.95's getting pretty bloaty for a micropayment. If that's a micropayment, then my dick is comfortably petite. Another year, another round of spunk to the gargle to the wee to the other wee. I can't help wondering if the Call of Duty people are losing their fiery psychopathic Second Amendment drive now that they've been painting by the numbers for so long. I mean, Black Ops 3 is yet another string of barely connected shootouts in various global locations, but it can't even summon the effort to be particularly racist. Yeah, the heroes are all burly Americans who shout too much, and there's a rather laughable character customization menu wherein you pick from 9 very, very slight variants on the same gormless white person, like you're trying to use Tinder in the middle of rural Kansas, but half the time you're fighting killer robots. That's not racist at all. Well, give it about 30 years, and maybe it'll be seen as insensitive towards AI Americans who don't have the privilege of having been born rather than procedurally generated, but what bothers me is, why is it still called Black Ops? Deniability was always kind of a tall order when we were murdering roughly the entire cast of an early Charlton Heston film, but why do we need deniability to massacre killer robots? Who are you afraid of offending, the fucking smoothie maker? Anyway, Black Ops 3 opens with our burly American heroes doing what they do best, whittling all over the sovereignty of an unstable foreign nation. Events unfold fairly predictably from there until the end of the prologue when our hero gets torn up a treat and has to get cyber augmented, which raises the usual slew of complex philosophical questions, such as, isn't this blatantly the same plot as Advanced Warfare? Except they couldn't get Kevin Spacey, so they got Robert Picardo instead, the next name on the smart but faintly sinister balding corporate types list. In fairness though, the plot gets bored of ripping off Advanced Warfare after a while and rips off Black Ops 1 instead, fucking about with brainwashing and altered perceptions, but with a kooky sci-fi twist. Also, the world building is for dog shit. Exposition's always bad in Call of Duty, since they routinely cut any scene that couldn't have a gun battle in it, but it feels worse than usual since, among other reasons, I never figured out what the fuck branch of the military we were supposed to be part of. We do stuff for the CIA, but I think we were just seconded to them. And come to think of it, the enemy's just this nebulous loose organisation of, quote, bad guys. The dialogue keeps throwing mysterious names and acronyms at me like a tech nerd trying to intimidate someone at a dinner party. The CIA are compromised by the NRC and the CDP, and they got a PAWS. What are you gonna do about it? Find a glossary, apparently, but fuck world building as long as the characters are solid. And on that note, why are female soldiers always no-nonsense snipers? Says something about the writer, I think, if they perceive women as mostly poking holes in things from a very long distance away. This game's no-nonsense sniper lady becomes a love interest eventually, the writer perhaps having heard that a romance is more satisfying if it occurs despite adversity, and I suppose a total lack of chemistry whatsoever could technically count as adversity. Besides everything else, I'm not sure I could ever fall in love with someone who responds to a grenade landing in her lap by staring at it until it explodes. I mean, I'm not sure I could leave her alone with the children, and a relationship should be give and take, so when she took no damage whatsoever, I wondered why she even needed me around. Did you notice how I seamlessly transitioned there from criticising the story to the AI? This is what earns me the big bucks. So I guess we're on the subject of technicals now, which is a shame, because I'd have loved to mention that the main character's voice acting sounds like he's delivering it through a used tea bag, but hey ho. Obviously your robot body has some special powers, wouldn't be much use otherwise except for more efficiently setting off the elevator weight limit alarm. For example, the tutorial shows you how to run along a wall. What it doesn't explain, of course, is that you can't do it outside the tutorial until you unlock the right bumper sticker to put across your chrome metallic buttocks, which led to some rather embarrassing moments when I hurled myself at a wall to follow my colleague and bounced gracefully off it into a skip. There are also special combat powers somewhat reminiscent of Syndicate, that's Syndicate, not the Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and remake Syndicate as opposed to original Syndicate. You point your magic gun fingers and enemies get fucked up. But a lot of the available cyber powers seem to be variations on a theme of make varying numbers of enemies stop shooting you for a bit, which all feels like a bit of a faff when you could just use the power that shoots killer cyber bees out of your mouth, which makes several enemies stop shooting you for a bit and then obligingly die after a little song and dance routine. The cyber powers feel a bit half-arsed because a lot of them are marginally less useful than just firing a bunch of bullets at the thing you're already pointing at. It's not like there's any shortage of bullets now every single gun uses the same ammo and resupply boxes are installed by all the fire extinguishers, but if there's any half-arsedness about the main campaign, it's probably because going by the range of alternative game modes available, the Black Ops dev team have the attention span of a moth at a fireworks display. The weirdly elaborate zombie mode is now a given and has only gotten weirder and more elaborate to the point that they actually hired Ron Perlman and Jeff Goldblum to be in it, which makes it all the more baffling that the protagonist of the main campaign had to make do with a random person they picked up from the bus shelter outside a brain hemorrhage clinic. On top of that, there's a free-running race mode now as well, which is the most pointless feature of the lot because like most modern FPSs, your character runs like he's got his trousers around his ankles. Fine, says the game, fuck me for trying. Here's some more zombies, you sheep. There's a second zombie mode where you play alternate versions of the campaign missions with zombies in. Props for including it as standard rather than flogging it separately 6 months down the line Red Dead Redemption style, but if people are unwilling to go 10 fucking minutes without fighting a zombie and refuse to take a job as an orderly at a retirement hospice, then it's on them to expand their fucking comfort zone. It's not helping to stick zombie modes in everything from games to classic literature, as one would add a subtitle option for the hearing impaired. One last point, you know I'm a placid, easygoing, kind-hearted, saintly sort of fellow, shut the fuck up, so I don't really care if a game's running in 30 or 60 FPS as long as I can see where the places to put the bullets are. It does, however, bother me when it keeps switching back and forth between 30 and 60 FPS as the in-engine cutscenes come and go. Kinda breaks my immersion after we kick the door down and suddenly brake pads are digging into my eyeballs. This was on the console version. I understand the frame rate's a little bit more flexible on the PC port. So much so that they decided with a random number generator. Ha ha. Oh look everyone, it's the game that was one of the two that came out on November 10th but doesn't require a prolonged leave of absence and a doctor's note to get through, so it's getting reviewed first. Rise of the Tomb Raider, also known as Exertion Noise the Game. Long awaited, acknowledged matter-of-factly sequel to the unhelpfully titled Tomb Raider, in which Lara Croft first began her life of adventure but apparently didn't sufficiently rise for Crystal Dynamics' tastes. This time around, rather than being thrust into a desperate survival situation, Lara Croft has taken a great big crunchy bite out of Nathan Drake's hairdo and plonked herself into one, ensuring that she has no one but herself to blame when she has to use the ruined exterior wall of an ancient Sumerian temple to whimperingly smash her compound fractures back into place. As before, there's something rather manipulative about all this, but I think the writers need to accept that they're banking on a finite resource. Yeah, maybe the first time the ickle girly whirly got her shit ruined, it triggered a protective instinct, but by incident umpteen squillion, I wouldn't lend her bus fare to the hospital of St. Gives a Shit. The game opens with Lara Croft climbing a big mountain, for you see the Tomb Raider is quite literally rising. Yes, make the most of that, it's about as good as the writing gets, as is swiftly illustrated when she and her sidekick ineptly bellow their lines at each other because I guess the actors were told the background wind was going to be really loud, but it wasn't, so they ended up looking like they're trying to get fired from the school play. At least Lara has finally figured out how to wear jackets in cold weather, although she still shivers like a carefree playboy trying to urinate. Do the fucking zip up, lady. The wolves don't care what your collarbone looks like. But a bite on Nathan Drake's hairdo is, strictly speaking, a nibble on Indiana Jones's hat brim, and so the plot wastes no time in ripping off The Last Crusade. Lara's looking for a magic thing, so poorly defined it might as well be the Holy Grail, and proceeds to murder and collateral damage her way towards it, and we're supposed to hate the villains for doing the exact same thing, despite the fact that they actually have a coherent idea of what they're going to do with it. And obviously there's a group of locals who have guarded the Grail for millennia and who constantly drop hints to which Lara remains totally fucking oblivious. We have dedicated our lives to prevent the Grail falling into the hands of outsiders, especially British ones, with names that rhyme with soft. That sucks. Still, at least you'll have some free time on your hands soon. And take a wild guess, do you think someone will actually take away the Holy Grail at the end of this plot, or will the hero undergo some kind of snap revelation and dramatically smash and or lose it because the world isn't ready? And I think I speak for the world when I say, could we at least have had a 6-week trial period first, you fucking asshole? So all in all, it's even more of a Last Crusade rip-off than Uncharted 3 was. It's even got the daddy issues and the 1,000-year-old Grail Knight knocking about who never in all the intervening years learned about wet shaving. But let's at least briefly acknowledge the gameplay. It's the classic Tomb Raider formula, by which I mean mostly more of what the last one did. One part faintly obnoxious collectathon to one part meaningless action sequences, all of which I now struggle to remember individually because I saw enough collapsing structures when I worked at discount stairlifts for fat people. As before, I liked the bits when you're, raiding tombs, climbing around ancient puzzles created by people who'd mastered camshafts before they invented the wheel, but with the usual sterling logic of AAA, these bits are mostly optional, whereas the combat you're stuck with. By the end of the game, Thighs of the Tomb Raider has the Metal Gear Solid problem of giving too many solutions for problems that aren't very hard, and by problems I mean human skulls. I literally upgraded the pistol for no reason except to make the menu stop bugging me about there being upgrades available. Between the assault rifle, shotgun, melee attacks, stealth attacks, crafted bombs, crafted molotovs, arrows, poison arrows, bomb arrows, and Mia Pharaohs, the pistol spent the entire game dangling off my arse like a can on the back of a wedding car. Don't forget character perks as you level up, such as the one that tells you you're aiming at someone's head when you aim at their head. Wow, thanks for the help, game. I thought he was balancing a pineapple between his shoulder blades. If your game's a side quest-a-palooza with collectible upgrades bursting out of its tear ducts, I want to know they contribute to something other than altogether now 100% completion. Like there's some ultimate challenge we're preparing for, because otherwise it's like putting on deodorant before going to the whorehouse. What's the point? They have to fuck you anyway. No, you can finish the critical path using nothing but what it hands you and 2 bits of old twig. Yet again, a AAA game treats its own content like dead wasps in the salad and suggests we eat around it if it bothers us. The most challenge I had was created by the weird time delay there seems to be on the camera controls, like Lara's wearing her depleted uranium friendship bracelets. But no side quest was going to fix that, unless you count the mystical journey to the options menu to find the sacred aim sensitivity slider of Kachun Babu. Yahtzee, are you trying to inflate the gameplay problems in this bland but let's face it perfectly functional piece of middle ground tosh? Probably, yeah. Something about the new Lara Croft rubs me up the wrong way, unlike the old Lara Croft who rubbed me up in a perfectly satisfactory way, especially when I was stuck opposite her on a packed subway train. So what is it that annoys me about her? Maybe it's the way she's constantly out of breath. She pants all the way through the gameplay and in cutscenes she's always talking like she's about to have an asthma attack. I want to give her a damn good shake and yell, "Take a breath, Lara! Fill that chest with air!" Seems like there's plenty of room. Or maybe it's just the shitty dialogue. Want to play the Tomb Raider drinking game? It's easy. Drink once every time Lara makes that one exertion noise that raises in pitch and sounds a bit like Yoshi doing a flutter jump, and drink once every time she says she's got to do something, and good fucking luck still being coherent by the end of the prologue. I've got to climb this priceless ancient monolith. I have to find a way to zip up my jacket. I must go down the chemist and get some refills for my inhaler. Take some fucking responsibility, Lara Croft. Don't talk like you're some helpless piece of chaff being tossed about by the swirling eddies of whimsical fate. Say, you know what? I don't have to climb up this burning ski resort and zipline off it onto a tiger, and I don't have to ensure my father's legacy either. I'm gonna do it because I want to. Because I have a death wish the size of William Howard Taft's trousers and an electric complex the size of my tits. Oh look everyone, it's the other game that came out on November 10th. The big fat one that rolls around for ages, selfishly hogging all the attention like the buttocks of a Kardashian, and which takes longer to get through than a family-sized broccoli cheesecake. Fallout 4, loud. You know, I don't think I'll ever understand why people always make such a huge fuss about the release of a new Bethesda RPG. The usual answer I'm given when I ask about it is that they look very impressive and there's lots to explore. But the same is true of, well, the buttocks of a Kardashian, which, just like a Bethesda RPG, only look good from a distance. The moment you get up close, you start to see all the stretch marks and the little pimples that were covered up with a bucket of fake tan and a cement trowel, and you never know when the whole thing's going to do a great big fart in your face. Bethesda RPGs are always deeply explorative, but never immersive. They make for some great screenshots, but the moment it has to start living and animating, you find it full of blank-eyed computer programs who struggle to navigate a 6-lane highway without a carelessly placed dog turd making their pathfinding bugger up, and who have a weird habit of mysteriously vanishing in front of doors, which the doors always find so surprising that they momentarily forget how doors are supposed to work. Is Fallout 4 any different? Do lamprey eels give pleasant blowjobs? Oh well, still at least it gives us a never-before-seen glimpse of the world before it was bent over a concrete traffic barrier and given a ruddy good nuclear seeing to. You play as one half of a loving couple in possession of a comically badly made animatronic doll that you somehow convinced yourself is a baby, who have to hoof it to a vault as the bombs drop. In the world of Fallout, the vaults are a system of underground bunkers designed to preserve the essence of white middle-class America in a world gone mad. Except, as has been established in previous Fallouts, they were all secretly designed to fuck with the occupants for giggles, which has got to be a shoo-in for the Umbrella Award for extremely contrived corporate villainy. So you and your family get cryogenically frozen for 200 years for the aforementioned giggles, and wake up to find yourself up one blasted hellscape and down one baby. So you set out on an epic quest to track down your animatronic son, and naturally get sidetracked within nanoseconds. As the plot unfolds, you find yourself caught up in a big multi-faction conflict centered around artificial humans created by a weird future cult, and the moral question of if they deserve rights, which suffers from the fact that we aren't given any clear personal investment in the debate. Granted, we had an animatronic baby, but that looked more like plywood and string than artificial flesh. Perhaps as an effort to force some investment into you, the various factions involved are rather alarmingly quick to trust. Wow, you did one mission for us because you happened to be passing and it was on the way to the pisser. You have demonstrated total dedication to our cause and we've decided to make you our king. This happens like 3 times, and the factions that don't go that far still aren't much better. Obviously, one mission isn't going to be enough to make you our king, quite yet, so we'll just make you our most trusted warrior and hinge all our future plans around your continued success and assumed loyalty. Listen, you dipshits, I'm just trying to fill an XP bar here. Maybe some of the fault is mine, because I try to avoid conversation options that might piss you off, and for that reason I seem to have accidentally taken a 1,000-year oath of allegiance, but excessive neediness just isn't attractive. Look at my dog. He doesn't need my approval. Maybe he'll move when I ask him to. Maybe he'll stand with tongue hanging out, blocking the doorway to the next objective, staring at me as I scream till I'm blue in the tits. The dog was something of a selling point, as I recall, since you can command him to go and pick things up for you. But this is never as efficient as walking over and getting it yourself. I thought exploration was the whole point. Why are you trying to get us to subcontract it? But he's handy to have in battle, I suppose, at least for the first 5 seconds before he's shot by every responsible gun owner in a 6-mile radius, or gets hit by a grenade thrown by me, because he just ran into a bunch of entrenched enemies and I wasn't going to wait for him to finish nibbling on their bums. Then he has to lie down and wash his bollocks while you sort it out. Lucky for him, I had about 90 stim packs by the end of the main plot. I had enough stimulation on me to fuel an entire sweatshop's worth of Chinese spinsters, and this was from only a token amount of side questing, mind. So I wouldn't come to Fallout 4 for a balanced or challenging RPG experience, which does rather raise the question of what the fuck we are here for. Well, it could be for a how much garbage can we fit in our underpants competition. See, in previous Bethesda games, you'd know that whatever currency you could get for stealing an office building's worth of rotary phones and waste paper baskets wouldn't make it worth the bother, but now there's a crafting system, so all bets are off, and you need to be dragging sackfuls of typewriters around in case they contain screws, which if you want to do any weapon and armour upgrading, have a street value of 2 discarded infants and a back alley hand job. Don't even get me started on town building, because that's totally what we want to do in an exploration game, isn't it? Behold, stout adventurer, 100 square miles of adventure and peril. Great, I'll just squat in the top left corner for 6 hours, building a giant light-up wooden statue of Michael Nesmith. I'll give it a rest, Yahtzee, you obnoxious lager belch bubbling through a bucket of cold jizz. You don't have to build a town or craft anything. You can just stick to mercenary adventures, or you can spend all your time hopping up and down on a riverbank with a saxophone down your trousers. It's up to you. That's kind of my point, though. Why is it up to me to figure out how I'm going to have a good time with this? That's what I paid Bethesda for. Loud. 4. See, the problem with Bethesda RPGs is that they always load them up with a whole bunch of shit that's all completely detached from each other, so when I come to review it, how do I know I didn't inadvertently only play the really shitty parts, and I'd have found all the good stuff if I'd taken the South Road and followed the signs that read, "Come Dumpster Adoption Centre." But in general terms, Fallout 4 has bent over backwards for gimmicky ideas of what the kids want these days, i.e. Minecraft, and has cut off some of its own bollocks to do it, or at least shaved them down with an orbital sander. The number of missions that just boil down to kill everything in this area and loot the place is almost Borderlandsy. lately, and the conversation system's been really simplified, and now it's actually quite difficult to be a complete git. The most you can usually do is agree to solve everyone's problems in a slightly sarky tone of voice. Yeah, I suppose I could just shoot them the moment they stop flapping their moist jaws like a broken animatronic vagina, but there's no karma system, and it's no fun being reprehensible unless I know I've disappointed someone. That's why I'd always wait for my parents to be around before I started sticking dog shit up my nose. So everyone's excited about the new Star Wars film, which is odd, because the only universal truths are that sunlight travels 1 astronomical unit to reach the Earth, and that the last 3 Star Wars films were a load of diarrhea on a hot skillet that your mum didn't give you permission to use. Everyone seems to have their own answer for how to fix them, focus the story on a more traditional hero-villain narrative, give Jar Jar Binks the lethal injection, stretch George Lucas's writing wrist across 2 blocks of wood and keep jumping on them until you hear the snap. But I say what they should have done was bring the plot down to the perspective of the common man. Forget about Master Jedis and queens who apply their makeup with a shotgun blast to the face. Focus on a single soldier in the armies of either the Rebellion or the Empire, a plucky everyman caught up in circumstances beyond his understanding, who runs out into one of the titular Star Wars and is instantly blown to bits by an enemy turret. And then, and this is the clever part, the action shifts to a completely different soldier in the same unit, who runs out and is immediately shot by someone 8 levels higher with a sniper rifle they haven't unlocked yet. Actually, no, that's a terrible idea, don't do that. Hey, I said don't do that, Star Wars Battlefront. Damn, too late. Why must I be cursed with such unquestionable charisma? Anyway, Star Wars Battlefront is a multiplayer shooter set in, as you could guess from the title, the Blake 7 universe. It will tell you that it has a single-player mode, and that is why it will go to hell for lying. I wish it was a rule that when games say they have single-player, they have to specify they mean a campaign, as in something that they put actual effort into. Or if they just set aside a little cupboard that we can sit in, spawn a couple of bots, and pretend we're playing the multiplayer somewhere where we won't ruin it for all the grown-ups. But what a multiplayer mode it is. Enter a server of up to 40 players and stand struck dumb with awe at the epic scenery adapted from your favourite Star Wars locations for a couple of seconds before someone sniper rifles your ghoulies into the 6th dimension. I'll be frank, all these big server 20-a-side shooters kind of play the same to me. You run out into a ball of chaos like one of those cartoon fights that take place obscured by a giant dust cloud, bully players that are newer than you, and then die after about 1 minute because a player you took for newer than you turned out to be less new than you. The question is the Star Wars thing merely an aesthetic change to sucker in fanboys like a Darth Vader pillowcase, or does it actually impact gameplay? Well, for one thing, the fact that everything shoots lasers carries the benefit that you can always see where the shots are coming from, and can pretend that you're in some nightmarish apocalypse where the glow sticks finally turned on us. Also, you can pilot classic Star Wars vehicles, such as the AT-ST Walker, that stands for a terrible staggering tossbot, which can ruin an individual soldier's shit well enough, but also makes you a bigger target than a lower back tattoo of Hillary Clinton's face. And then there's piloting flying vehicles, or to give its proper name, spectator mode. The I'm bored of actually being part of this conflict, let's take a break to look at the scenery for a few minutes mode. You have minimal effect on the ongoing ground battle as you speed over it too fast, shooting inaccurately at what could either be enemy soldiers or a row of baby ducks. So you just dogfight with the enemy pilots and hope you're providing the people doing the actual fighting with an exciting morale-boosting sideshow, followed by a fireworks display and a refreshing shower of jagged white-hot metal. There's a special mode where everyone's in flying vehicles, which if anything is the multiplayer experience boiled down to its most basic level. Fly randomly around the swarm, shooting the red dots and hoping no one pays attention to you. It's like covering your ass with glow-in-the-dark paint and trying to navigate a public school dormitory. And the other thing that the Star Wars setting offers is heroes, major characters from the films with more health and special powers who you can occasionally become on the battlefield in order to secure an advantage. And when I say you, I mean everyone besides you. Because with 20 guys on the team, you have better odds of getting picked to be the next Milky Bar kid. For that reason, I rather enjoyed playing the Hero Hunt gameplay mode, where one hero goes up against everyone else, and if you kill them, you get to be hero next. That's a system that actually rewards individual merit, of which Ayn Rand would be proud, and also has the tantalizing air of an exciting gang rape scenario. Trouble is, it cycles through the hero characters with each change, and I'd somehow always end up having to be Princess Leia. It was just like how it used to go down in the school playground. Luke Skywalker and his deadbeat dad, spoiler alert, get to swing their glow sticks around like intergenerational ravers. Han Solo runs around like he's just noticed that his gun has turned into a giant hairy spider. And what does Leia get? She can put up a shield. Oh, have mercy, your grace. But I suppose if they'd given her a power based on what she did in the films, then they'd have had to come up with something themed around constantly being captured and getting her jugs out. I suppose I like the Hero Hunt mode because it's the one mode that seems to be doing something a bit different. Every other mode boils down to 2 teams lining up and trying to be the first to complete an objective. And the specific objective your team has doesn't matter for shit. In public multiplayer, you are but a single pint of water in a wave crashing madly against rocks. That is all that it can ever be when you have 40 players all pursuing individual glory. There's no coordination. You can't even talk to each other beyond emitting Wilhelm screams as your bodies go flying. There's barely any point in even letting us know which team won, since the only thing deserving of points for the victory is Brownian motion, which has no need of weapon upgrades. Which is not saying it can't be fun, but it's the empty hedonistic fun of popcorn chicken, little parcels of high-octane action devoid of all context. Why not play with friends, I hear you ask? Good idea, Ranulph. Try organising 40 mates into a single game and let me know how it went once you get released from being sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Star Wars Battle Cunt certainly puts the emphasis back on the wars most part, but you know what this kind of game is? It's an asshole recruitment drive. You start playing as a fresh-faced level 1 and get murdered by assholes. Obviously you don't give a half ounce of creamy baby excrement about helping your team win. Your only real motivation is to avenge yourself upon the assholes. But by the time you've got the better guns that the assholes used on you, they've moved on to firing dark matter jizz rockets out of their level 40 diamantine vaginas, and so you can only avenge yourself on their lower level teammates, ensuring that the bleak cycle will begin anew. Congratulations, you're part of the asshole system. Now are you just gonna plop out of it like a good little turd, or hang around and give it bowel cancer? So they made another Just Cause game. Why Just Cause? Good, I'm glad we got that out of the way quickly, but since you ask, it's Just Cause 2 was one of my favourite games of its time. And I will say again what I said then, because it's easier than having to write new words. Just Cause is the sort of thing AAA gaming should be making all the time, because it's the only thing it's still best at. If consoles are going to keep endlessly pushing for better graphics, more pixels, bits, flips, flops and fannies, we don't want them to use it to render Ellen Page crying on a toilet. We want to see it rendering more trucks exploding than we've ever seen explode before. We want to see every single bit flying off and embedding itself in the flank of a passing squirrel with poor reflexes. Happily, Just Cause 3 is very much on the right page as it elevates to the new generation the old classic formula: wanton destruction, extreme freedom of mobility, and a sandbox the size of Galactus's left bollock populated exclusively by NPCs who drive like complete maniacs. Hey Yahtzee, the imagery of this video is going by too quickly for me to properly digest. Well then, my advice to you would be to just pause. The protagonist of the Just Cause series, Rico Rodriguez, has undergone quite a bit of evolution as he's aged. He started out with a sort of vampire Johnny Cash thing going on in Just Cause 1, leaned more towards swivel-eyed loon in Just Cause 2, and now in Just Cause 3, well, try to come with me on this. He looks like your first girlfriend's dad. You know what I mean? With his Al Borland beard and dressed head to foot in blue denim, he looks like he derives all his kill-crazy rage from you having fucked his daughter on top of his favourite riding mower. He returns to his home country of Medici to liberate it from the cruel regime of a brutal dictator, so I guess his entire career as a professional dictator agitator has been him psyching himself up for the one he has actual personal investment in, which is theoretically an appropriate raising of the stakes for a third installment, I suppose, but in practice it's a thin, sugary crust over the creme brulee of explosion-fueled hedonism. Some of the characters are quirky and interesting, but I feel getting invested in a Just Cause game for the plot is like getting invested in crystal meth because the loss of teeth makes it easier to fit crisps in your mouth. Just Cause 3 is at first glance an easy sell, everything that made Just Cause 2 fun, and also some more stuff on top of that. So Rico retains his parachute and hookshot that tether the laws of time and space to the back of a burning jeep and drive it off a cliff, and now he's also got a Far Cry 3 style wingsuit to get around more quickly and make ground-based vehicles all the more fucking useless as anything other than party favours. Shame, because some of the most fun I have in Just Cause can be found in simply trying to drive somewhere without flipping your car 9 times because you ran over a crisp packet. The ability to tether things to other things has been updated with the ability to make the two tethers pull towards each other, allowing you to enact heartwarming stories of the newly realised love between an enemy soldier and a nearby cow, or an enemy soldier and a brick wall. You can also use it to bring down structures until you realise that you've also got infinite trigger explosives and can instantly bring down anything you can get close enough to smooch. So after you've made an executive toy out of cows dangling from helicopters and get it out of your system, the tether pulls become an inefficient gimmick when you're working your way down a to-do list, and by do I mean obliterate. It is what I now term the every sandbox, in that progress is marked by liberating sections of the map by completing the side quests in each one, and the actual plot sort of hangs over that like a storm cloud trying to make up its mind if it wants to fuck up your barbecue. But happily they remembered the important thing: liberating strongholds is inherently fun. It's not just going through the in tray at the murder accountancy firm. Here's a compound with lots of stuff in it, we want there to be no stuff in it, and we don't give half a piss-stained lira how you get us from A to B. My preferred method was to ignore enemies completely and hookshot around too quickly to kill, plant trigger bombs on as much of the stuff as I could, then retreat to a nearby hill and set them off while putting on some sunglasses and looking the other way. A spanner was frequently thrown in these works because the plant trigger bomb button is the same as the chuck grenade button, and the game has a nasty habit of switching back to grenades without telling me. So I'll hookshot onto the side of a big fuel canister and be like, wait, this doesn't look like a trigger bomb, but that looks like my left leg drifting off into the sunset. Guess it's time to break out the Just Gauze. Let's keep running down the shit that exists to make me pissed list. I don't like how Rico moves like an elderly woman on an escalator whenever he's on top of a vehicle. Understandable when he's on a plane, not so much when he's on the deck of a boat. I parachute onto a troublesome gunboat with a defiant cry and gun in hand, then start dawdling around it like I'm wondering if I left the gas on. I wish Just Cause would do more with underwater stuff. You drop into the water and there's this lovely undersea landscape to explore, but fuck all to do in it. Why do these all-terrain sandboxes always remember to have 9 types of helicopter but 0 fucking submarines? Right, what else? It'd be nice if I could turn off all the leaderboard bollocks, which I'm pretty sure is one of the reasons why the loading times were so bad in this country where the internet has to get strained through a mosquito net. I don't want a message informing me that Triple X Bastard 69 has beaten my my record for sitting on a cowpat belching the alphabet, taking up valuable screen space that could have been filled with more explosions. Or if the idea was to motivate me, the phrase "everyone likes you and wants to kiss your face." On the PS4 version, I had some chuggy frame rates and the occasional crash when things got too explodey. Gotta love that extra stability you get from console gaming, he said, bitterly firing the words from his mouth like sour squirts of an old man's jizz. Oh yeah, and what's with having to unlock iron sight aiming as an optional upgrade? When you're playing a shooter with a controller, that's like having to unlock the ability to turn left. But I suppose my final big issue is that the game gets pretty lackluster by the end. Just look at the map. Start off at the bottom on a collection of islands covered in fine detail and clustered towns and bases. Then I guess the designer had an urgent dental appointment and the last island is a great big massive blob with like 9 things on it. And the final boss fight is plainer than beans on toast. For no adequate reason, the evil dictator fights you one-on-one in a fucking volcano. Could one produce a more perfect example of insert climax here? Also, he fights you in a helicopter. Oh, guess I'm fucked. I'll just beg for my pathetic life once I've finished picking the remains of the last 18 million helicopters out of my teeth. And then there you are, standing nonplussed in the middle of your liberated country with a profound sense of anticlimax. What do we do now? I guess we could call up some just whores. Well, it's that time of year again. The stockings have gone up and the owner of the stockings has been paid $20 and left my motel room. Yes, it's almost Christmas and there's just time to get caught up with something I missed before the end of year roundup. Project Zero Maiden of Blackwater on the Wii U. If you're not familiar with this franchise, it's kind of like Ringu by way of Pokemon Snap. You take candid paparazzi photographs of Japanese ghosts, so all their ghost cellulite gets put on display in Ghost Cosmopolitan and they die of shame. The series is called Fatal Frame in the US, which is one of the few cases of an American localization change I wholeheartedly support. Not only is Fatal Frame snappier, no pun intended, but it actually means something. It's a game about death and photography. Fatal Frame. It is not a game about whatever the fuck Project Zero means. What, we're taking pictures of ghosts for our school project, which is the prequel to the first school project we made? Or maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong and it's Project Zero, as in a game about characters from Metal Gear Solid 3 being forcefully thrown out of a nightclub. In any case, Fatal Frame games always have the exact same plot. One or more schoolgirls with skirts so short you can practically see their labial folds peeking out the bottom like the questing feelers of a tunneling spider, is trapped in a dilapidated area that's really haunted because some kind of death torture ritual was conducted in the past there by someone with really liberal interpretations of Japanese Shintoism, and there are pretty good odds that one or more characters will turn out to be the reincarnations of somebody or other. In this case, the severely underdressed schoolgirls are trapped on a mountain that's haunted because some crazy motherfuckers were packing young women in gift boxes out of devotion to the FedEx branch of Shintoism. And speaking of liberal interpretations, Maiden of Blackwater has strange ideas of what trapped means. Every single chapter ends with the current protagonist going, "Oh no, we're in the middle of a haunted forest full of inescapable hostile ghosts who want to claim our soul. How can I possibly get out of this one? Oh, I know. I'll fuck off home. Eat my tea and have a bit of a sleep, then contrive a new reason to come back to this deadly haunted mountain tomorrow night." Usually the reason is to look for a missing person. One wonders why we couldn't save time and look for 2 or 3 of the established missing people while we're up there, but whatever, maybe we're getting paid by the day. If we find the missing person dead, we fight their ghost. If they're alive, we take them home and go, well, this possessed person who keeps wandering off obviously needs their space. Let's put them to bed, unsupervised, in an unlocked room, and then sit at a desk for 6 hours frowning at something. I swear this happened like twice for every character in the game, and I only played up to about halfway through the story. Frankly, I ended up rooting for the ghosts, because ironically they were the livelier ones. They're dead and angry, so they're going to take it out on the living. That shows about 10 times the capacity for rational decision-making as the alive characters ever display. At least they don't react to deadly supernatural threats by raising their eyebrows a quarter of an inch over the course of about 10 seconds. At least they don't run like they're running through a boys' locker room with very sticky floors, flapping their limp wrists left and right, going, "No, please don't flick me with your towels, tee-hee." See, I've enjoyed Project Fatal Zero Frame games in the past. I found them slow-paced but uniquely atmospheric, but Fatal Frame Pirates of Darkwater, who remembers that, takes the slow-paced thing a bit too far. Over and over again we go through the same maps fighting the same ghosts. Over and over again our character sees something frightening and reacts like she just realised she forgot to take the library books back. At one point during a cutscene the camera holds on an establishing shot of some teacups for like 6 whole seconds. I fucking counted. And as for atmosphere, it's got the atmosphere of a party thrown to celebrate a successful mass lobotomization. Part of that's the Wii screen controller. Using it as the camera made sense in theory since it's built like a Fisher-Price My First Smartphone, but immersion was impossible. Every time my gaze had to shift from the TV to the controller, it would also track over my poorly vacuumed carpet and growing mountain of foul-smelling tissues, and my brain would go, "We're not in a haunted forest, we're in our flat," trying to stave off the inevitable moment of drunken self-reflection. Besides, teleporting behind you is the only source of entertainment in the life of a ghost, and the controller tilty controls aren't much help at that point unless you're sitting on a lazy Susan. So between the controller and the boredom and the characters acting with all the common sense of a lobster in a jacuzzi, immersion is impossible, and therefore it's not the least bit scary, which as we all know is the foot that ultimately kicks the chair out from under the bad horror game. I didn't even jump when ghosts suddenly appeared, and jump scares are as easy as it it gets. A cat in a bin can manage a jump scare, and most cats haven't seen Ringu 1 or 2. Maybe they shouldn't have put great big indicators on the screen going, hey, I'm not saying there's going to be a ghost, but maybe look over there, wink wink. Maybe the characters could have reacted like the ghosts were something more than an occupational hazard. Or maybe the game shouldn't have given me 20 Uncle Felching healing items at the start of every chapter, and killed any chance of actual challenge. Which leads us to the question, if the game isn't scary, challenging or interesting, then what does it have left? Well, I'm glad you asked, myself. The answer lies in the mechanic wherein the ghosts get more aggressive the more wet you are. Well, the playable characters are always pretty fucking wet, but I meant in the moisture sense. How you know that you're wet is that your clothing becomes realistically clingy and see-through, which sheds certain light on the fact that most of the protagonists are teenage girls wearing thin white cotton blouses. Oh, that's right, it's a Koei Tecmo game. I did wonder why most of the female ghosts were rocking more cleavage than the San Andreas Fault. You know Koei Tecmo, they make Dead or Alive, which is a fighting game series in the sense that late-night Cinemax films are thrillers. Now, I'm no harumphing prude, as you know. I'm masturbating right now. I get that cheesecake is a grand noble tradition in fighting games, which are about larger-than-life characters spreading their legs and jiggling about like they're trying to scratch their itchy assholes with the thread of their G-strings. But an atmospheric horror game is the kind of thing I play in the 20 or 30 minutes of the day that I don't spend masturbating. No, it's just realism, I'm sure the game would argue. Clothes go clingy and see-through when they're wet, that's what happens. Christ, talk about political correctness gone mad. Granted, I would reply, but why do our clothes not go clingy and sexy when we're playing as the one male character? Oh, you're gonna say that's sexist now? It's just because he wears thicker clothing, because he's a man, and therefore possesses a brain. You can't have a new year without a top 5, so I'd better do one before the Earth halts in its orbit around the sun and plunges us all into eternal winter. As always, only games that have been reviewed in Zero Punctuation are in the running for the top and bottom 5. That being the case, bear with me a moment. Undertale is a good game. Etc, etc. Right, now we've got that over with, look alive, because here come the 5s, Clive. Dragons are the midwife of new ideas. You get a new idea, best to do it first with dragons, so people don't get scared off. Then if that works out, you can put your new idea in whatever horrible setting your disgusting mind can conjure. Heartening to see that process in action this year, as Dark Souls begat Bloodborne. Dark Souls gameplay in a glistening wet orgy of Lovecraftian horror. You gotta love it. And then you gotta launder your bed sheets. Might ruffle some feathers here, because this game was perfectly functional, but I feel the need to take a stand against games that think a handful of mindless multiplayer modes is worth exactly the same retail price as 4 full-length retro games plus the pizza afterwards. It was going to be either Evolve or Star Wars Battlefront, and Star Wars clinched it for the slightly patronising attitude of, we all know you nerds will buy anything with a Wookiee in it. You know what, before we move on, good games yay, bad games boo is all very well, but what about the third category? For the first time, I'd like to introduce a third top 5 list, celebrating the games that did nothing interesting, took no risks, pushed nothing forward, and which were generally to the year of gaming what Martin O'Malley was to televised debate. Without further ado, here's my 5th blandest game of 2015. What's that? Jim Sterling just did something like this. Well, it's a good thing everyone knows that I write these a few weeks in advance, isn't it? Otherwise, they might have accused me of ripping him off and made complete fucking fools of themselves. While it has its moments, Batman Arkham Knight made its mistake when it thought, how can we enhance our characteristic stealth action adventure for the last installment? Oh, I know! Let's take out some of the stealth action adventuring and replace it with Tonka toys being smashed together in the clumsy fists of an idiot god. While I did have some issues relating to questionably necessary monsters, insofar as it can be said that monsters are ever not questionably necessary except on the front of a box of sugar puffs, there's more than enough to recommend in Soma regardless. It may now go down in history as the second best atmospheric narrative horror game with philosophical themes set at the bottom of the ocean with an existential plot twist in it of all time. Speaking of questionable necessity, mainstream culture has gradually been coming around to the idea that video games probably aren't all murder porn aimed at the high school massacre demographic, but this was not intended to be taken as a fucking challenge. The game that strutted about in its big black controversy knickers, dropping embarrassing turds from its leg holes, conveniently named after the reaction it provoked, Hatred, although after release they should have renamed it Dispassionate Ridicule. Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, or as it might as well have been called, Everybody's Gone to the Toilet, on the reasonable assumption that they won't miss anything. I'm all for doing new things with interactive story, but after you throw away traditional ideas of pacing, challenge and coherent narrative, you are actually then supposed to replace them with something. Over the years, AAA gaming has been trying to pummel us into accepting that we have no choice but to have graphics like Rembrandt had sex with industrial light and magic, and that means we have to sacrifice the kind of in-depth detail and storytelling we used to have in our open-world RPGs. But then Witcher 3 replied, "Oh no, you don't. You just have to work until your bollocks drop off." I, for one, appreciated CD Projekt Red. Hope the reattachment surgery goes well. Have you ever wanted to be a giant all-powerful monster? What about a giant all-powerful monster wading through knee-high runoff from the dog food factory? What about a bloke dressed as a giant all-powerful monster attempting to navigate a discount furniture warehouse wearing really uncomfortable shoes? No, didn't think so, but here's Godzilla anyway. May it return to its 1,000-year slumber at the bottom of the ocean just in time for another BP oil spill. A textbook case of a franchise in holding pattern while it figures out what to base itself around now it's taken out the fun bags. Rise of the Tomb Raider. I look forward to the next installments, Beginnings of the Tomb Raider, Induction of the Tomb Raider, Tentative Steps into Pubescence of the Tomb Raider, after which of course comes the reboot. You know I don't ask much of games, just a good central mechanic and a game world roughly 180,000 light years in diameter. What I like about Elite Dangerous, title drop, is that it's not insecure like some of these other jerks. It's not worried you'll piss off if you can't explode something with lasers every 4 nanoseconds. Kick back, fly around, be alone with your thoughts in the depths of the infinite, then when you do explode someone with lasers it still feels special. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Dissipating Remains of a Pirate? Number 2 worst is not only a barely playable, unfinished, horribly designed litre of cold wee-wee, but one that got poured down the trousers of one of PC gaming's oldest franchises, soaking the knickers of its proud legacy of 1, arguably 2, sort of good games. Alone in the Dark Illumination. I can only presume they made it multiplayer focused on the principle of a problem shared being a problem halved, but even if you split the cold piss between you, you're just ruining 2 pairs of trousers. What rundown of mediocrity would be complete without a visit to the series that must now legally credit the Microsoft Word Find and Replace tool as the lead designer? With Syndicate, Assassin's Creed has dribbled its way to a standstill like a camel with a leaky hump, and not the good kind of leaky hump. No sense being coy, it's Undertale, the darlingest of 2015's indie darlings, which I haven't reviewed properly because it really is best experienced from knowing as little as possible, not unlike a leaky hump. The basic appearance hides a deep narrative that manages to be funny and touching without horrifically derailing itself, as well as the kind of unique and deconstructive gameplay that actually makes an impact on the medium, unlike the following. Well, in fairness, it did have some impact, that being the impact of Sony's hand against its forehead as they muttered, "Christ, what the fuck were we thinking?" Where do you start on The Order 1886, the werewolf game with like 3 werewolves in it, that took all the potential of its setting and fired it out of drab, tedious cover shooter gameplay, with a plot that just sort of gave up and cut off halfway through? Well, I don't know where to start, but I know where to stop, when the hacksaw blade gets lodged in the pelvic bone. Poor old 343 Industries, they tried so hard to make Halo 5 interesting. They played up Master Chief being hunted for crimes, and then his crime was like 1 notch below an unpaid parking ticket. They bring Cortana back to life, and that had all the impact of finding a rotting Malteser under a beanbag chair. There's only so much you can do with the material, I suppose. It's like trying to paint a masterpiece with used bath water on a canvas of dryer lint, in a house made of bog roll, in Swindon.